Hey guys, this is Jay Calder from Jay Unboxing here, going over the week's biggest fights, including some of the biggest fighters, and of course some of the best results, handing out some fighter grades. And as always, I'm always curious to know what you thought of some of these fights, as well as who you thought were some of the big standout performers and performances. Would love to hear all of that down in the comments section below. Some very solid fights this weekend, starting early Saturday morning all the way over in Japan, heading well into the evening here in the United States. We had unification at middleweight, top junior middleweight performers taking on one another, as well as a couple of big returns and some title fights and more. So let's not waste any more time and start handing out some of these grades. Now, the first fighter we're going to go with here is Gennadiy Golovkin, who defeated Ryoto Murata via 9-round technical knockout, retaining his IBF title and picking up the WBA middleweight title in the process. And the grade that I'm going to be going with here is an A-. Now, yes, that grade's a little bit high, but it's not so much just for the performance itself, which was pretty good, pretty gutsy. He certainly showed that at the age of 40 he has something left in the reserve, but it had a lot more to do with the sort of circumstances of the fight. You know, this was a big unification fight against a big, tall, strong middleweight, you know, away from home in his home country after a very long layoff, and yes, at 40 years of age, he managed to unify part of the middleweight division. Only one other fighter in history has done so, and that'd be Bernard Hopkins, so he's in very good company. It was a very good win in a lot of those kinds of ways. Now, technically speaking, did he look older? Yes, he looked 40 at times in there, as a matter of fact. That being said, when you consider the circumstances, and when you consider that there are very few fighters in the sport that have done the sort of list of things that I just mentioned there, you know, unifying, 40 years old, looking good, long layoff, all of those sorts of things, you realize how good of a performance this was in a lot of ways. Perhaps some of those moments where he, you know, was hurt to the body in that third round showcase that maybe he's going to be in trouble in that trilogy fight with Canelo should it happen later this year. But in microcosm, for this particular performance, you have to really take your hat off to the guy. It was a very solid performance indeed. Of course, made my prediction correct on top of that, and of course that has to be rewarded, which is why he gets the high mark. Now, the next fighter we're going to go with here is Ryoto Murata, who did lose to Golovkin, as mentioned, via 9-round technical knockout, losing his WBA title in the process, and the grade that I'm going to be going with here is a C+. Now, if this was a 5-round fight, his grade would be substantially higher, and he probably wins that fight because he started so well. He got off really good, started landing some power shots very quickly, was the aggressor, was pushing Golovkin backwards and really making him look all of his 40 years of age, as well as hurting him to the body in the third round. I mean, he really looked on his way to potentially pulling off a pretty sizable upset, which some people did expect him to be able to do, but very few, to be perfectly honest. And yet, the fight, of course, was not 5 rounds. It was, you know, as crazy as it is to imagine, it was actually scheduled for 12. And as a result of him fading, you just see where his kind of ceiling was and is as a top flight middleweight in the sport, and that's kind of where his grade takes such a huge dent. Of course he lost, and that happens, and of course that's going to affect the grade as well, but it's much more to do with the fact that now he's lost facing the top of the division as well as kind of on the way up with against a Rob Brandt, and it just shows that he has certainly a ceiling in the sport, and he's not exactly perhaps the fighter that a lot of people were hoping he would be at middleweight. I still think he gives a lot of 160-pounders some trouble, but at the very top I think is where he himself would run into that sort of trouble, and I think the grade I'm giving is kind of indicative of that. Now, the next fighter we're going to go with here is Ryan Garcia, who defeated Emmanuel Tagoe via 12-round unanimous decision in the lightweight division / junior welterweight division, as it was at a 139-pound catch weight, and the grade that I'm going to be going with here is a B-. To be honest with you, I contemplated giving him a lower grade, but because of a couple of the sort of caveats to this fight, I didn't. But I really did think about it. The reason I didn't, quite honestly, is because he's a young guy, having come back from a long layoff and injury / surgery. He's, you know, training with a new trainer after leaving Eddie Reynoso after having been with him for so long, and he's fighting an opponent in Emmanuel who just does not look like he's trying to fight all that much. It's a very negative performance on his end. I had to cut him a little bit of slack for that. That being said, this was not the sort of performance that he was looking for. And to be honest with you, both Golden Boy, DAZN, however you want to look at it, were lining up Tagoe as the kind of opponent that Garcia is supposed to look good against if he's the superstar they're making him become or trying to make him out to be. He should have been able to deal with this a little bit better. I think most people would agree. Again, it's not the worst performance in the world, but he was really matched here to look great and ended up really just looking above average at best in this fight, which is kind of where that grade kind of lands. It's just not the sort of comeback performance he was looking to have, but again, I do give him a little bit of a benefit of the doubt, and hopefully him and Goosen can kind of work together a little bit more and kind of put the full package together for him, and of course we'll see if that happens heading into the future. Now, the next fighter we're looking at here is Sebastian Fundora, who defeated Erickson Lubin via 9-round technical knockout in the junior middleweight division, and the grade I'm going to be going with here is an A-. And to me, in a lot of ways, this might have been the stand-up performance of the weekend. Maybe him and Golovkin tied for that first spot, but truthfully, he really showed a lot of the toolbox here. I mean, he was willing to fight. He had some skill in there as well. He was so busy, some toughness, showed a great chin. And then even when he did get hurt and decked in those middle rounds, he was able to come back, shake it off, and really took the fight back, by the scruff of its neck in the very next frame. It really showed a lot of wherewithal for a younger fighter on the come up in a pretty talented division. In my personal opinion, he still gets hit too much and was still struggling at times to keep his work clean. He's just a little too upright sometimes naturally. He's a very freakishly tall person for the weight. He's 6'6", weighing in at 154 pounds. Sentence can pretty much stop there in terms of kind of explaining his freakish qualities. That being said, he certainly has a style that works for him and will trouble a lot of 154 pounders. I do think that a winner of, like, say, Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castaño probably still is a pretty sizable favorite over him, but at the same time, he, because of that engine, because of that chin, and because he can put punches together so well, will always have a shot in those sorts of fights. So, of course, it'll be interesting to see as his career progresses. And the next fighter we're going to look at here is Erickson Lubin, who, as mentioned, lost to Fundora via 9-round technical knockout in a junior middleweight clash, and the grade that I'm going to go with here is a C-. Now, I'll start off with a little positives here. In fairness, based on the toughness and the overall skill that he showed on Saturday, he beats a lot of 154 pounders. Maybe even Fundora under different circumstances if he were to listen to Kevin Cunningham, his trainer, a little bit more. He just seems to get his tactics wrong in this one, and as a result of that, you kind of see what his biggest flaw is in the game. He's a very tough guy mentally, but just not durable physically. Now he's, been stopped in the first round when he faced the aforementioned Jermell Charlo, and now has been dropped and busted up. Physically, he just seems to give in before he does cerebrally. It's not an ability of whether or not he's willing to do it. It's just, can he do it physically? I think he has a chance of making some noise in the division against some of the other kind of up-and-coming fighters. Maybe a Tim Tszyu, for example, would be a relatively interesting fight if billed towards correctly. But as it's always the case, kind of rebuilding your career a second time, which is what he'd have to do here, and really building it for the third time at this point, it's just going to be a very difficult task for him to do, and it gets tougher every time you have to do it. Again, seems like a very strong-willed person. He probably has it in him, but it remains to be seen just how successful he can be as a result of it. So, of course, as always, it'll be a waiting game there. Honorable mention goes to Shane Mosley Jr., who defeated Gabe Rosado via 10-round unanimous decision in the super middleweight division. Grade I would have gone with there is an A-. Might not have seen anything special in him, so to speak, on Saturday, but it was a very good performance, probably his best as a pro to date against probably his biggest named opponent in Rosado. So a solid win for sure. Really showed a composure, a fundamental skill that was overall just kind of lacking from him in his past, where he just kind of let the moments get the best of him. He showed a lot of poise, a lot of composure in this fight, controlled the action, pretty much pitched a shutout against a guy who's, been around the block a time or two, even hurt a guy in Rosado who doesn't get hurt very often. So solid performance from him, of course. And again, shout out to Kevin Cunningham for what he did just in terms of his corner work. Gave great insight, gave great tools and ideas for what to do in the fight, gave a lot of the same sort of things that I would have probably suggested Lubin do myself, and I just think he had a great understanding of how to do it and coaching him properly, getting enthusiastic about it as well. Didn't go over the top dramatic with it, but certainly was trying to let him know the severity of those moments as well. And in the end, stopped the fight when it was very tough in terms of the decision that he had to make in that moment. But I think he probably did the right thing for Lubin's sake. All in all, just a great overall performance from a cornerman, and kind of goes to show just sort of the difference between a great and a pretty good coach. And he really showed his mettle there, and it's just an appreciation for him. I think is definitely something I wanted to shout out there. In any event, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Would love to hear your thoughts. some of your grades, what you agree with on me or disagree. Who do you think kind of stood out as the biggest and best performance of the weekend? Let me know down there in the comments section below. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at jcalderon_JOB. You can email me at jagunboxing@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you there. Also, be sure to check out jagunboxing.com for schedule, results, betting odds, rankings, and more. Of course, later this week, be sure to check out my prediction for your Dennis Ugas versus Errol Spence in the welterweight unification clash they will be having on Saturday. We'll have that out in a little bit. And as always, until next time.